Good morning. The music was so loud it knocked a stone off the pilot's temple. That's what we like. So I do want to mention this. Those of you that remember Kent Humphrey, who is our worship leader from 2004 to 2009, is going to be singing the Midnight Cry song every night for 2 weeks. So that's good. That's a miracle. So what is a miracle? Well, here's what we've said the last couple of weeks. And today's going to be a little different because I want my friend Andy to share a miracle with you that he and his family experienced. But a miracle is simply something that, I expected that or unexpected, a welcome event that cannot be explained by human reason, natural law, or scientific law. Therefore, it is considered the work of a supreme being, the work of God Almighty that creates these miracles. So we welcome miracles. We want a miracle. Some of you may be in need of a miracle right now in your life. How many of you are, you say, I'm just in need of a miracle right now in my life. Let me see your hand. Several of you. Several of you. Now, there are those who say, well, I've heard of miracles and I've read about miracles, and they're great, but I've really never been a part of a miracle. And what does a miracle look like? Is it somebody who's blind, they now can see? Is it somebody who couldn't walk, and now they can walk again? Somebody who couldn't speak, now they speak? What exactly is a miracle? And we've tried to define that in the stories that we've given you in the last couple of weeks. Raising somebody from the dead, that absolutely would be a miracle. But you know what? Your marriage may be in need of a miracle. You may need your marriage to be risen from the dead. Your bank account may need a miracle. Your relationship that you're in right now, or relationships, may need a miracle. Your health, maybe it's your health. Maybe your health needs a miracle. Maybe your job needs a miracle. Maybe the fact that you're failing all your classes at school and you're praying for a miracle that you pass or pass a test. You need a miracle. The very fact that we're breathing right now is a miracle that God has given us, the sustainer of life. Take a big deep breath, and that is a miracle. Your heart may need a miracle. Maybe you're on a spiritual low. Maybe it's been a long time. Maybe you could say, to picture it, to give a metaphor, you're in a valley right now, and your heart is really spiritually in trouble. You don't feel like spending any time with God. It's when you do, it just doesn't seem to really go anywhere. So you feel like God's void in your life, so there's a spiritual emptiness, and your heart needs a miracle. There's a girl, her name is Joni Eareckson Tada. If you've been a Christian for a long time, or you listen to the radio, or read books, or any stories, you're somewhere down your journey, you're gonna come across the life of Joni Eareckson Tada. She, in 1967, had a diving accident. She broke her neck, and she was a quadriplegic for many, many years, almost 50 plus years now that she has been in a wheelchair. A rehabilitation for 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks that she had this diving accident. She went to rehab, wanting to get out of that bed. And she laid in that bed for 2 straight weeks. And she said, God, why did this happen to me? God, why'd you let this happen to me? What's going on? I'm a good girl. I've prayed to you. I'm a Christian. Why would you let something so devastating happen to me? This should happen. I read about it, somebody else, but not me. God, why is this happening? Please help me get out of this bed. And her prayers and her frustration turned into spirituality. Now, how many of you know that when you get in trouble, you get spiritual all of a sudden? You find yourself, I got to read the Bible today. I'm in trouble. I got some real trouble in my life. my bank account's in trouble, my marriage in trouble. All of a sudden, I'm going to get spiritual. You been like that? I have. And you read more, you pray more, you give more, what you try to do is earn God's favor. That's not going to happen because God allows things to come into our lives that will simply cry out to him. And here's what happened. Her spirituality became angelic. She said, I became an angel-like being because I wanted God to heal me more than anything else. Joni went to these miracle meetings, and she would get in line with all the wheelchairs, knowing that when the healer would put his hand on her, that she would get up out of that chair. She knew that Jesus was going to heal her, but she's realized that frustration and all of that was God showing her that he had a different plan for her life. Well, Joni always enjoyed painting, but when she had this diving accident, she didn't have any use of her hands. So she discovered the way to paint was to use her teeth and to paint. Let me see a couple of these other paintings. She painted this, she did this. She's got several paintings. You can go online. This is probably my favorite painting, and that's Jesus down through the water, if you can see it from back there in the back. Go online and look Joni Eareckson Tada and just, put her art, and that's what'll come up. Man, what a great story. She has visited 50 countries several times. She's written a number of books, many honors that she has received, a lot of honorary doctorate of divinity, a doctorate that she's earned in humanity, a doctorate in human letters. Here's a couple of books if you know of somebody that's really going through suffering, or somebody that you yourself is going through suffering. The two books that really stand out, one book that she's written is called The Mystery of Suffering. The Mystery of Suffering. And then another well-known book that she has written, When God Weeps. And these books have ministered to a lot of people in the world. Now in 2011, Joni Eareckson was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so and throughout that experience, she's written another book entitled Beyond Suffering. But every day, somewhere in the world, you're going to turn on the radio or go to the website or listen to it online. It's a little radio program called Joni and Friends. And it's about a 5-minute program that she just talks about encouraging believers, talking to unbelievers, and how to deal with suffering, because she said, I have received my miracle. Even though I prayed and I wanted to get up out of that wheelchair, God gave me a miracle like no other. He healed my faith. My faith has been so strong. He's healed me mentally. He's healed me spiritually. And I have chosen this journey that God has prepared for me. I could have chosen, she said, the journey of bitterness, upset, being angry, the questions all the time, God, why are you allowing me to go through such pain and agony? But I began to understand how God has used me and in the lives. And it won't be very long that you will discover that when you are going through what you're going through, somewhere down the road, God's going to bring a person across your path that's going through what you're going through right now. And on the other side of that journey, you can be an encouragement. Say, hey, let me tell you how I went through the very thing that you're going through right now. Everything is for a reason. God allows us to go through these different seasons in our life, and that we will just keep our attention focused on him. Now, there's a story in 2 Kings chapter 4. I'm not going to read the passage today because of time, but I want to paraphrase a little bit about 1 through 8. 2 Kings chapter 4 has to do with a man named Elisha. And Elisha was a prophet. And he had all these servants with him. And these servants would follow him around. And he would find someone who is in need. And being a prophet ordained and anointed of God, some crazy and unbelievable miracles that were under the auspices of his time in the Old Testament. And there was a poor woman who knew about Elisha. And she came to Elisha and she said, Elisha, and this is in the first 8 verses of 2 Kings chapter 4. I'm so poor and I have nothing. And bill collectors have come to my doorstep and they want me to pay up. And in that day and age, if you didn't pay your debts, they would take something of real value, so that your debt would be paid for. They would take your kids. She had 2 sons, and they were going to take her 2 children to be slaves. Now, if I was living in that day, and, the debt collector, hey, we need your kids. Here they are. You can take them. You can have them. I'm teasing about that. My kids are so wonderful. But I'm just thinking that, man, what if? What would you do as a mom? You're poor. You have nothing. And here's these debt collectors. They're here to collect. They want to take your children. Here's what Elisha said to do. Go to your neighbor and get as many jars as you can get. And lay those jars out and then take some olive oil. And the poor woman said, Elisha, all I have is 1 flask full of olive oil. He said, take that olive oil and begin to pour that into these different jars that you have borrowed from different neighbors. So he said, get all the jars, go in to a room and close the door behind you and begin to fill those jars up. Now, what's interesting about that whole, she didn't ask, why are you asking me to do this? She had the faith, and that is so important, that whether the oil would have come out of that flask or not, she had the faith and believed that it would happen. That's very important when it comes to a miracle. Just believing whatever God's going to do, it's going to happen. And she took that flask of oil after walking into that room, closing that door, and began to fill all those jars up. And the oil just kept pouring into these different jars. And her sons, Mom, no more jars. That's it. And when the last jar was full, the oil ran out. She went to Elisha, now take that olive oil and sell that olive oil, and you're going to receive enough money to pay all your debts off and to feed your 2 boys. What an amazing miracle. When you get to verse 8, all the way down through verse 36, there's a story of a woman from Shunem. And this woman from Shunem loved Elisha. She knew of Elisha's great works, knew of his great ministry, knew that he was a great prophet. And everywhere that Elisha went, miracles would happen. This woman told her husband, listen, when Elisha walks by, when he's in our town, when he's in our village, I want us to feed him. I want us to give him drink. I want to make sure that he has enough rest so when he travels into the next town. But every time, so she told her husband, and she said, let's do this. Let's build a room. Let's build a room off the house that will accommodate he and his servants. And when they come by, they can stay in this room. We'll put a table in there. We'll put food in there. We'll put a lamp in there. We'll put a few chairs in there. We want to take care of the man of God, because they felt that if they were close to the man of God, that they were close to God. So every time Elisha would come by, and he was so overwhelmed, he was so encouraged, so moved, that this couple, this lady and her husband from Shunem, would build a room just for Elisha and his servants. Was just beyond belief. So he told one of his servants by the name of Gehazi to go and ask that lady, Gehazi, you ask that lady whatever she needs. Does she want us to go see the king in her favor on her behalf and ask the king that the king would do anything for her because she has been so kind and so wonderful to us? And so Gehazi went to this Shunem woman from Shunem and said, Elisha wants to know, what can we do for you? You've been so kind to us. You've reached out. You've built this room off your home. Elisha wants to know, we'll even go to the king for you. She said, no, listen. My husband and we can't have a child. I would love to have a child. So Gehazi, with that information, went back to Elisha, and Elisha said to Gehazi, what does she need? What does she want? Well, they can't have a child. You tell her that next year when we come by her house, she will have a baby boy in her arms. And so, sure enough, Elisha and his servants walked by, and there she was standing in the doorway with that baby boy. Then that boy grew as a young man, and he's out in the field with his father, and they're working. And the boy had a headache, and he said, Dad. And before he could say anything else, he fell, and he fell dead. And so the husband ran and told his wife, and they came out and they tried to revive him. Here's what she did. She said, go and get Elisha. She knew the source of the miracle. She knew the source of strength was through the man of God. So Elisha was at the foot of Mount Carmel. And there Gehazi and the servants had followed this lady as she wanted to tell Elisha herself. And she fell at the feet of Elisha and bowed down and held his feet and said, Elisha, my son is dead. So Elisha got up and he walked with the woman from Shunem and her husband and the servants. And he walked into the home where the boy laid in a room. And he said, nobody come into the room. And he went into that room and shut the door. And he breathed life into that boy. And he stood up. What a miracle. What a miracle, bringing life to that boy. Now, I don't know about the takeaway from that story. These miracles are great, and somebody would say, well, that's a Bible story, and, those kind of things happened in the Bible. And I need a miracle in my life. But what I take from this story is the simple fact that the woman from Shunem and the poor lady in the first 8 verses knew where that source of power and that strength was. That man of God was the connection to this woman. When Elisha would come into that village, this woman knew that when she was close to the man of God, because the man of God was close to God. But let's remove the man of God. Let's remove him out of the picture. Let's remove him out of the middle. And it's you and God. And the connection is so important with God on a daily basis. To saturate your mind with Scripture, to saturate your mind with prayer, to saturate your mind with fellowship, to saturate your mind with what God has for you. Here's the important thing that I'm trying. Joni Erickson Tada is at a place in her life. It may not look like physical healing, but to her, it's healing. Her faith is stronger. Her mind is stronger. Her well-being is stronger. Her drive for life is stronger because God has given her that purpose that she found in discovering God's will. And no matter what it looks like and what we strive and what we want, our desires has to be God desires. And when we realize God's desires become our desires, it changes everything about miracles in our life. Now, Andy and I have been friends for a long time. Andy and his family have been at this church, and he and his wife have just experienced a great miracle in their life. And I asked Andy if he would share that miracle here with you today. This is Andy Sasser.
Like Matt said, my name's Andy Sasser. My wife is Jen. Some of you guys know us, some of you guys don't. This miracle I'm about to share with you guys has been ongoing it's taken 2 years. So anybody that says, I learned the hard way that it's not my timing, it's God's timing. And I'm going to start off with my wife has endometriosis. If any of you guys know what that is, basically it makes it very, very complicated for us to conceive. 1% to 2% chance of conceiving on our own, of having kids. We have 2 girls. My oldest is going to be 8 this year. We had help with a fertility doctor to have her, and God blessed us 12 months later without any help on my second, who is Willow. Since then, we've been trying on and off over the last, Willow's going to be 7, so I'd say the last 5 years, because I'm going to bring you into fall of 2015, where God's like, I'm going to perform a miracle, and we got pregnant on our own. 1% chance. We did not have any help. We got pregnant. Flash forward 12 weeks, we lost that baby. At that point in time in my life, I'm like, okay, I know you have a plan here, God, but I don't get it. You make 1% chance, and then now we're 12 weeks later, and we lost it. Well, hindsight, which is always beautiful, right? Hindsight showed us that Jen had an issue, that her blood was not clotting properly, or was clotting, so she was not absorbing certain vitamins that help, balance out her blood clots, or keeps our blood from clotting. And that's what we learned through that, because we had chromosomal testing, nothing wrong with the baby, found out it was a boy. I have 2 girls, found out it was a boy, so that made it even more devastating for me. But as devastated as Jen was, I always try my best, because I try my best to find positives, because I feel God orchestrates things on purpose. There's a verse in the Bible, and it's in 1st or 2nd Samuel, and don't quote me on this, I'm not a preacher, but it basically says that God will not allow bad things to happen to you without bringing something new to be born. Now, with that being said, that doesn't mean it's going to happen like we want it, okay? So flash forward a few 4 months. We're May 2016 at this point. So we lost the baby in January. We get to May, and God's like, guess what? I'm going to have to get you pregnant again on your own. And I'm like, at this point, I'm numb. I'm like, that's great. I'm excited. But I've never experienced loss like I did. I've lost loved ones. I lost my grandpa when I was 16, but I never knew losing a 12-week-old baby could hurt the way it did. And I know that's a loss that a lot of women experience. I almost feel like they should have help centers for that, because I don't understand it, but it hurts really, really bad. And so we get pregnant again May 2016. I actually spoke that month with you, and kind of we're going through what I was going through in my life at that time. And needless to say, none of us knew that I would be here, because we lost that baby at the beginning of July. And at that point in time, I'm numb. Jen's emotionally broken and physically broken, because I'm a guy, I can't have a baby on my own, so I can only feel the emotional and spiritual side of this. Jen's feeling emotional, spiritual, and physical. And with that, we tend to turn to music a lot to help minister to us. And there was a song, the job I was in at the time, basically I would drive a lot. I had a lot of driving time, I still drive a lot, but I was driving back from Virginia, I remember, and I was doing something for my company there, and I drove all night. I just didn't want to get up in the morning and do it, so I drove. And there was a song that I had discovered by Hillsong that really ministered to me, and it's called Even When It Hurts. And if anybody knows this song, you know the lyrics, but I'm going to share a few with you. It's, even when the fight seems lost, I'll praise you. Even when it hurts like hell, I'll praise you. Even when it makes no sense to sing, louder than, I will praise you. And then it goes on a few more lines, and then it says, and I will sing till my miracle comes. And I bring that up because I feel that things happen in our lives for purposes, and we don't, half the time when we're in it, we don't know what that purpose is. We think we know what it is, and then God's 180 in the other way, and you're like, I'm completely lost now, and you're mad. And there was many conversations that me and Jen had that we were mad at God. And I got to a point, I was a little bit further along because she's, of course, dealing with the physical side of everything as well. So I told her, I was like, you know what, it's okay to be mad at God, Jen. And she goes, what? I'm like, think about it. I was like, God, first of all, wants you to talk to him. But second of all, it's okay to be mad at him because he can handle it. He expects us to not get it. He does. He doesn't expect us to understand why he does the stuff he does to us. And it's the truth. And so later that year, in late 2016, my company sends me a letter saying, hey, we're switching health insurance carriers because Obamacare. Your premiums are going up. I'm pissed. I'm just mad about it. And I pretty much said, I told Jen, I was like, I got to find a new job. And she goes, really? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just fed up. I'm tired of traveling so much. This is just like the icing on the cake. We can't afford it. I need to find something else. And so basically, I started looking for a new job, started interviewing, and we're getting into 2017 now. The new insurance kicks in, and nobody's calling me back. I mean, I'm having interviews. I feel like they're going great, and I'm upset. I'm like, I want better for my family. I have kids. I want to progress my career. I don't understand this. And Jen, for the whole thing, was cool, calm, and collective and said, honey, if it's God's will, it'll happen. Just let it go. And I was like, what? And she goes, I know, but just let it go because for some reason I have a peace. Well, we started digging into that new insurance, and come to find out, they pay 90% for in vitro. And so if anybody knows what in vitro is, basically it's like the furthest step you can go to having help to get pregnant. Basically, they take the female egg and they take the male stuff and they mix it together in a dish and basically fertilize that egg, because in endometriosis, that's where you struggle. And basically at that point, then they put it back in, and they usually put two. So sometimes that's how you see people with quads and stuff like that having kids, because the egg both take and then they split. Well, so my company, as mad as I was at them, all of a sudden now they're paying, on a $15,000 bill, they're paying $12,000 of it. And I'm sitting there like, well, this is definitely God. But I want to see where he takes this. Because I don't want to say I haven't been burned, because God doesn't burn people. But I, at that point, was like, you're kind of like, well, you got thresholds, right? Can we get to 12 weeks? Can we get beyond that? That was my mentality. It's like, I'm excited, but I'm kind of like reserved. And so Jen, with that process, had to give herself shots in the stomach every day for blood thinners because of her thing that they found, her blood clotting issue. And then we had to give her progesterone shots in the back for 6 weeks. And needless to say, as things progress, you're optimistic. You have your threshold. You got your 12 weeks, we made it. 12 weeks, we're good. And then we got to 16, and we got to find out what the sex was. It was a boy. And then you get to 20, and it was funny. It was like, I didn't share all this with the first service, but you get to a point where Jen's on Baby Center, and she's got these emails coming to you saying what your baby looks like. Your baby looks like a lemon today. And it's like, oh, great. And then all of a sudden, then it keeps progressing. And I remember it was around 29 weeks, and we got this one message that said, your baby can now breathe on his own if he was to be born now. And that was like a weight off the shoulders. Because as much as stuff could still happen to any one of us, I felt like God had got me to the point to where he was going to allow this baby to be born. And so I say all that because, John, me being up here is, I think, a miracle in general. But, it's amazing because this journey we've been on, and a lot of times you're not, like everybody, if you're looking for a miracle, sometimes you won't see it. Sometimes you won't know that it was a miracle until like 6 months later. And this journey, I remember kept saying, I'm like, every time I got to a tough part in it, I kept thinking to myself, man, I hope you're getting glory somewhere on this, because I feel broken. And there's a song that I'm heavy into right now by Evolution Worship. I think that I'm saying that right. It's called There Is a Cloud, and it talks about I think this song to me talks about different seasons of our lives. We have dry seasons, wet seasons, but basically dry season would be like almost like a depression, a drought, something that you're struggling with and you're waiting for God to rain down on you. And it talks about how God sows seeds in sorrow. I don't understand that. I'm not going to sit here and try to explain that because I don't understand it. But I know he does it because he did that with me. I lost 2. And I know there's the argument on pro-life and all that stuff, but any woman that's ever lost a baby, whether it was 4 weeks or 12 weeks or even longer, just because you can't hold that baby physically doesn't mean that didn't exist. Doesn't mean that there's no loss. It's the most unexplained pain I've ever felt in my life. And Johnny and Lynn, needless to say, Johnny and Lynn have been huge mentors in my life. Johnny and Lynn Claiborne, they're like family to me. And we ended up making it through. And February 23rd, 2018, we had a baby boy. And his name is Marshall. Love it, Sasser. And we brought him the second Sunday that he was born, because the first Sunday we were still in the hospital. The second Sunday he was born, we brought him to church, and Johnny and Lynn Claiborne gave us a little gift. And it was a little tile, kind of like a coaster, that had the picture I sent to Johnny on it. And basically on it said, "I am a miracle." And then Matt started his miracle series that Sunday. And I said to John, I was like, "Did you guys plan this?" And he goes, "No." And I was like, man, I got to tell Matt this story. This is crazy. I mean, just the whole 2 years that we have this trip we have been on. And from not understanding God's plan, I still don't understand God's plan, but I do know because of Jesus, and I'm going to say this, and I didn't say this in the first service, that because of Jesus, I get to see those 2 kids I lost. And that, for me, makes it bittersweet. It was tough to go through it, but it's sweet because in the end, I get to see them. But so I say all this just to say, I share this story, and it's just amazing. Like, sometimes I don't understand God's plan. I don't think anybody really understands God's plan at that time, because we have plans for our own lives. I know I had a plan for my life. I'm in the Randall family. I had a plan to have like 10 kids by now. But at the same time, I have 3, and I lost 2. So technically I have 5 kids. And this life is but a vapor. And I can't wait to see those other kids. But in the meantime, all I can think about is what crazy plan God's got for Marshall. Because he set the stage from a $1 billion insurance carrier to change insurance, all the way to allowing us to do in vitro, it's almost overwhelming. I can't even explain everything. Like, what is your plan for this kid? He's 3 weeks old now. And I just sit there sometimes and just stare at him and go, you are loved by so many people, and you are wanted for so long. I hope you live up to the hype, little buddy. But I'm just kidding. I don't mean that. But what I'm saying is I can't even fathom, because God does crazy things. And like I said in the first service, it's not like people raising from the dead stuff you see. It's stuff like, hey, I orchestrated like 5 different people over here that are going to influence your life, but none of them know you right now, or they don't even know each other. And then all of a sudden, when you take a step back and watch it, and it's just like, it's too coincidental not to be God. And that, to me, is what a miracle is. So I think I'm all right.
I want everybody to see this little baby. Come on up here, Jennifer. He's been born 3 weeks, and I think the first week you had him at Target. Is that right? You had him. Had him at Target and had him at church like 4 days into his life. Right up here. Look at that. That's little Marshall. Marshall Lovett. Marshall Lovett Sasser. Oh, man, that's bad. Oh, man. Well, just like the first service, let's have a prayer. God, thank you for this family. Thank you for Andy. Thank you so much for Jennifer. Thank you for Willow, and thank you for Izzy. We thank you for this beautiful baby that you have brought into their lives, Marshall Lovett Sasser. So just bless him. We dedicate him to you. Great things are going to happen. In Jesus I pray. Amen.